He was paid to guide a widow and her baby across the deadliest stretch of desert in the West. No names, no questions, just gold up front. But when the baby got sick, when the water ran dry, when bandits came riding with guns drawn, he didn't run. Somewhere between the dust storms and gunfire, he stopped being a hired gun and became a man worth following. The desert wind carried dust like it carried rumors, dry, bitter, and never entirely true. Jesse Calhoun leaned against a post outside the Blackstone Station freight house, chewing a matchstick and squinting at the horizon. His duster coat was faded, sweat-streaked, and the color of desert ash. A Remington rifle was slung across his back, worn but clean, like its owner. Jesse didn't look like a hero. He didn't look like a villain either. He looked like someone who'd been through too much to care which one people thought he was. Inside, the station master was counting out gold coins onto a crate lid. "That's half now," the man grunted. "You'll get the rest when she's safe across the state line." "She got a name?" Jesse asked, not really interested, just covering the silence. "Mary Ellis. Husband died 2 weeks back. She's bringing their baby to claim a land grant out past Cross Bend." "A baby?" Jesse's eyebrow twitched. "You hiring me to babysit?" "You're hired to get them there alive." Jesse took the pouch, tied it to his belt, and walked outside without a word. That's when he saw her. Mary Ellis didn't look fragile. She looked like someone who had been fragile once and had to bury it to survive. Her dress was plain, dusty blue cotton, buttoned to the collar and worn at the hem. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and her skin was pale with exhaustion. But her spine? Straight as a fence post, and in her arms was a swaddled infant, maybe 6 months old, sleeping against her chest. She met Jesse's gaze like she wasn't afraid of men like him. That caught his attention. "We ride at sunup," he said flatly. "No delays. You slow me down, I leave you behind." Mary didn't blink. "You'll get your gold, Mr. Calhoun. You won't need to carry me." Jesse tipped his hat and turned toward the stables. But something about her, maybe the hollow behind her eyes, maybe the way she held that baby like she was holding the last piece of someone she loved, it stuck with him longer than he liked. That night, they camped behind the station house. Jesse lay by the fire with his hat over his eyes, pretending to sleep. He heard the baby fuss twice, then settle. Heard Mary singing something under her breath. Soft, cracked, but steady. Not a single complaint. Not one tear. When he opened his eyes before dawn, she was already up, tightening the saddle straps with blistered hands and whispering to the baby. Jesse stood, stretched, and muttered, "Let's ride." They didn't speak for hours, but Jesse kept glancing back at her as they rode, and each time he did, she was right there, upright, eyes forward, child wrapped tight. He'd ridden with soldiers, deserters, outlaws. None of them carried themselves like that. And by the time the sun set behind the dunes, Jesse Calhoun, a man who swore he didn't care who hired him, had already started to care more than he should. By the 4th day, the desert had turned mean. What started as a dry breeze became a full-blown sand wind by midday. It clawed at their clothes, slapped grit into their eyes, and whistled sharp between the canyon stones like something alive. Jesse rode ahead, head low, his hat cinched tight. His scarf was pulled up over his nose, but it barely helped. Behind him, Mary leaned forward in the saddle, shielding Elijah with her arms and body. She'd wrapped him in a wool shawl, holding him so close it looked like they were one creature, not two. The wind howled. The mules brayed. They needed shelter, and fast. Jesse spotted it just as the sun vanished into the dust. A split in the rocks, narrow but deep. An arroyo, dried and cracked but low enough to break the wind. He led the animals in, hands blistered from the rains.
"Here,"
he shouted over the gale.
"We wait it out."
Mary slid off her saddle stiffly. Her skirt was stiff with dust, her cheeks wind-burned red. She didn't ask questions. She didn't complain. Just sat down and clutched Elijah to her chest, rocking in place as the child began to cry. Small, hoarse wails muffled by the scarf over his face. Jesse tied the mules, then rigged a tarp between two jutting stones. It wasn't much, but it had cut the worst of the wind. He crouched beside Mary and dug a shallow pit for fire, just enough for a few coals and warmth. Jesse took his coat off without hesitation and draped it around her shoulders. "You'll freeze," she said. "I've been colder," he replied. He handed her a battered canteen. She took it, drank little, then held it to Elijah's lips. Only then did Jesse notice her hands, cracked, raw, bleeding at the knuckles. "You should have said something," he muttered. "No time for that," she said. "We keep moving, or we don't make it." Jesse opened his saddlebag, found clean cloth, poured the last of his water onto it, and gently wrapped her hands. She winced, but didn't pull away. "I lost my daughter during the war," Jesse said, voice low, almost lost in the wind. "Fever took her. Took my wife, too. I was off chasing some general's orders." Mary looked up, surprised by the sudden confession. "I didn't come back in time," he added. "Didn't get to say goodbye." She didn't speak for a long moment, just placed a hand on his wrist and squeezed. Not pity, not forgiveness, just understanding. Outside, the storm screamed like it wanted to rip the tarp away and bury them. Inside, Jesse sat close to the fire. Elijah had stopped crying, his head tucked under Mary's chin. Jesse stared at the flames, at the baby, and at the woman holding him together with nothing but willpower and grief. For the first time since he buried his family, Jesse Calhoun felt the ache of something waking up. Not guilt, not regret, something quieter, something like purpose. He didn't sleep that night. He kept the fire alive. And somewhere deep in his mind, a promise started forming, one he hadn't spoken out loud yet. "They'll make it. Over my dead body, if they have to." The wind had passed, but it left behind silence. A thick, humming quiet that pressed against their ears and made every hoofstep feel loud. Jesse crouched over his map by a dry patch of brush, tracing the faded ink lines with a sun-split finger. Mary sat nearby under a crooked Joshua tree, holding Elijah close. The baby's cough had deepened overnight. Rougher, wetter. He wheezed as he slept. Mary noticed Jesse's expression before he said a word. "What is it?" He didn't look up. "We've got two ways forward. One safe, long, and slow." She nodded. "The other?" "Quicker, less water, bandit country." Mary swallowed, glancing down at her son. "Can he make the long way?" Jesse met her eyes. "I don't think so." That was the only conversation they had. By noon, they veered off the main trail and entered the gulch. A sun-baked ravine with walls that rose too high and closed in too tight. The light turned red and eerie in there, like riding through the inside of an old scar. Jesse kept his hand on his revolver the whole time. They pushed hard. Mary's eyes grew heavy from the heat, and her lips cracked from thirst. Elijah stirred restlessly, fussing in her arms. Jesse gave Mary the last of his water without saying a word. That night, they stopped near a natural rock shelf for cover. The stars were out, sharp and cold, but there was no comfort in them. Mary fed Elijah in silence, rocking gently. Jesse stood watch, and that's when he saw them. Two silhouettes at the far end of the gulch, rifles, watching. He froze. then slowly stepped back toward Mary. "Get on the mule," he said, voice low, controlled. "What is it?" "Trouble." She didn't argue. She wrapped Elijah tight and swung up into the saddle, just as Jesse pulled his rifle. The two men stepped forward into moonlight. Dirty hats, greasy mustaches, weapons drawn. "Evening," one called. "Didn't think we'd catch travelers this late." Jesse didn't answer. The man grinned. "What have you got there? A lady and a baby? Kind of you to deliver." Jesse leveled his rifle. "Back away." The second man raised his own weapon. Too slow. Jesse fired first. The shot echoed like thunder in the narrow ravine. The man dropped with a scream, grabbing his leg. "Go!" Jesse shouted. Mary kicked the mule into motion, holding Elijah close. Jesse backed toward her, firing once more. The other bandit ducked and ran. They rode blind through the rocks, Jesse covering the rear, dust and adrenaline thick in the air. When they finally reached open land, Mary was crying, not from fear, but from relief. Jesse rode up beside her, grabbed the reins, slowed her down. They didn't stop until dawn, at a creek, with clean water. Jesse dismounted and sank to his knees in the stream, scooping cold water into his mouth, into his hair, over his arms. Mary held Elijah, trembling. His coughing had stopped. Not better, but not worse. Jesse looked at her, soaking wet, exhausted, holding that baby like a soldier guarding a flag. "You still think this is worth it?" he asked quietly. Mary met his eyes. Her voice didn't shake. "Yes." And something in Jesse shifted. Not like before. Not guilt, not duty. Conviction. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from something. He was running toward something. And nothing, not men, not storms, not death, was going to stop him now. The wind had passed, but it left behind silence. A thick, humming quiet that pressed against their ears and made every hoofstep feel loud. Jesse crouched over his map by a dry patch of brush, tracing the faded ink lines with a sun-split finger. Mary sat nearby under a crooked Joshua tree, holding Elijah close. The baby's cough had deepened overnight. Rougher, wetter. He wheezed as he slept. Mary noticed Jesse's expression before he said a word. "What is it?" He didn't look up. "We've got two ways forward. One safe, long, and slow." She nodded. "The other?" "Quicker, less water, bandit country." Mary swallowed, glancing down at her son. "Can he make the long way?" Jesse met her eyes. "I don't think so." That was the only conversation they had. By noon, they veered off the main trail and entered the gulch. A sun-baked ravine with walls that rose too high and closed in too tight. The light turned red and eerie in there, like riding through the inside of an old scar. Jesse kept his hand on his revolver the whole time. They pushed hard. Mary's eyes grew heavy from the heat, and her lips cracked from thirst. Elijah stirred restlessly, fussing in her arms. Jesse gave Mary the last of his water without saying a word. That night, they stopped near a natural rock shelf for cover. The stars were out, sharp and cold, but there was no comfort in them. Mary fed Elijah in silence, rocking gently. Jesse stood watch, and that's when he saw them. Two silhouettes at the far end of the gulch, rifles, watching. He froze, then slowly stepped back toward Mary. "Get on the mule," he said, voice low, controlled. "What is it?" "Trouble." She didn't argue. She wrapped Elijah tight and swung up into the saddle, just as Jesse pulled his rifle. The two men stepped forward into moonlight. Dirty hats, greasy mustaches, weapons drawn. "Evening," one called. "Didn't think we'd catch travelers this late." Jesse didn't answer. The man grinned. "What have you got there? A lady and a baby? Kind of you to deliver." Jesse leveled his rifle. "Back away." The second man raised his own weapon. Too slow. Jesse fired first. The shot echoed like thunder in the narrow ravine. The man dropped with a scream, grabbing his leg. "Go!" Jesse shouted. Mary kicked the mule into motion, holding Elijah close. Jesse backed toward her, firing once more. The other bandit ducked and ran. They rode blind through the rocks, Jesse covering the rear, dust and adrenaline thick in the air. When they finally reached open land, Mary was crying, not from fear, but from relief. Jesse rode up beside her, grabbed the reins, slowed her down. They didn't stop until dawn, at a creek, with clean water. Jesse dismounted and sank to his knees in the stream, scooping cold water into his mouth, into his hair, over his arms. Mary held Elijah, trembling. His coughing had stopped. Not better, but not worse. Jesse looked at her, soaking wet, exhausted, holding that baby like a soldier guarding a flag. "You still think this is worth it?" he asked quietly. Mary met his eyes. Her voice didn't shake. "Yes." And something in Jesse shifted. Not like before. Not guilt, not duty. Conviction. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from something. He was running toward something. And nothing, not men, not storms, not death, was going to stop him now. They spent 3 quiet days at Dead Horse Station. The old medic, name was Doc Rusk, had given Elijah a cough remedy that actually worked. The baby started sleeping again, not just passing out from fever, but real sleep. Soft, steady breaths. Mary finally let herself rest, too. For the first time since her husband's death, she slept through the night with both arms free. Elijah bundled beside her in a box lined with blankets. Jesse used the time to repair the mule tack, sharpen his knives, patch the holes in his coat. But mostly, he just watched them. Mary and the boy. The way she sang while washing his clothes by the trough. The way Elijah would reach toward Jesse now, no longer afraid. And the way Jesse no longer felt like a ghost in someone else's story. But peace never lasted long where Jesse Calhoun walked. It was on the 4th morning that he saw him. A lone rider came over the ridge just after sunrise, his silhouette sharp against the dusty sky. Jesse knew that posture, too straight, too controlled. Military. As the man got closer, Jesse's shoulders stiffened. Gray duster, polished boots, a long scar down his right cheek like a tear that never healed. Marshal Len Cavanaugh. They had served together in the war, once, but Jesse had walked away from his commission when the killing no longer made sense. Cavanaugh? He stayed in uniform. Believed in order, believed in rules, believed deserters like Jesse didn't deserve a second chance. Jesse stood by the post when the marshal reined in. "Well, I'll be damned," Cavanaugh drawled. "Didn't expect to find you out here changing diapers." Jesse didn't rise to it. "Just passing through." "With a woman and a child?" Cavanaugh looked past him toward the cabin. "That doesn't sound like the Jesse Calhoun I knew." "Maybe you never knew me," Jesse said quietly. "Maybe not," Cavanaugh replied. "But I do know your record. Walked off your post in the middle of a deployment. You still owe years." Mary had come outside by now, Elijah on her hip. She instinctively stepped closer to Jesse. Cavanaugh noticed. "That your family?" Jesse didn't answer. The marshal dismounted, slowly. "Look, Calhoun, I don't care what you've been doing out here, but you broke the law. That doesn't vanish just 'cause you found something soft to hold on to." Mary's voice cut through, calm but steel-lined. "He saved my child's life, twice." Kavanaugh raised an eyebrow. Good for him. But saving lives doesn't erase what he ran from. Jesse stepped forward. You want to take me in? Fine. Do it now. But she and the boy ride on without me. Kavanaugh stared at him, then slowly holstered his pistol. No judge out here, and no cell either, he said. I take you. It's a week's ride back through outlaw country. That's not a trip I'm eager to make. He turned to leave. Next time we meet, Kavanaugh said over his shoulder, you better not be carrying a borrowed life on your back. And with that, he rode off, dust curling behind him like a warning. Mary walked up to Jesse as the marshal disappeared. Was it true? She asked. Did you leave the army? Jesse's jaw tightened. I left after they burned a town full of kids, said it was necessary. I disagreed. Mary said nothing for a moment, then quietly, you didn't walk away. You walked out with your soul intact. Jesse blinked. It had been a long time since anyone looked at him like that, not with suspicion, not with disappointment, but with respect. He didn't say a word, just took her hand, held it, and didn't let go. They left Dead Horse Station at first light, stocked with enough supplies to last 5 days. The air was already heavy with heat, the kind that doesn't move, just settles on your shoulders like a burden. Jesse rode in silence. Mary hummed softly to Elijah as they moved. The baby was alert again, full of tiny sounds and pink in the cheeks. But the desert was unforgiving, and it didn't care about recovery. By the end of the second day, they were down to 1 full canteen. Jesse wasn't worried. Yet. There was a well just north of Split Rock Ridge, one he'd used before. Old but deep. Always had water. They reached it near sundown. The wind had picked up again. Not a storm, just mean and restless. Jesse dismounted, tied the mules, and walked up to the stone ring. He dropped the bucket once. No splash. He frowned. Tried again. Still nothing. He tied a lantern to the rope and lowered it slowly. When he brought it back up, the metal was bone dry. The well was empty. Jesse swore under his breath, turned to Mary. We've got a problem. She didn't blink. How bad? Next water's 2 days south. Off course. Rough trail. Mary looked down at Elijah. His lips were dry again, his fingers twitching with early fever signs. Jesse uncorked the canteen and handed it to her. You take it. She shook her head. You haven't had any since yesterday. I've been thirsty before, he said. He hasn't. Mary hesitated, then poured a capful into Elijah's mouth, drop by drop. That night, they camped beneath a low cliff, using the rock face to shield them from the rising wind. Jesse didn't sleep. He sat by the fire, staring at the flicker. He'd been dehydrated before, in the war, on drives, on bounty runs gone wrong. He knew the signs: dry mouth, tunnel vision, that fog that sets in around the edges of your brain. And they were all starting to show up now. In the middle of the night, Mary stirred and saw him sway. You need to lie down, she whispered. I need to get us out of this hellhole. Jesse muttered. You'll drop before morning if you don't drink. He looked over at her. You drink. Elijah drinks. I'll walk on fire if I have to. And he meant it. By dawn, he could barely see straight. His steps were clumsy, his hands numb, but he mounted the mule, adjusted the saddlebags, and helped Mary up behind him, Elijah wrapped tight between them. They rode in silence. By noon, Jesse nearly fell from the saddle twice. But then, just as he thought his legs would quit, the wind shifted. He smelled it. Wet earth. He rode toward it like a man possessed. And there it was. A thin stream trickling from between rocks. Barely a spring, but enough. Mary jumped down first, filled the flask, pressed it to Jesse's lips. He drank like a man returned from the grave, then collapsed into her arms. She caught him, held him there, whispered, "You're not dying on me now." And Jesse, through cracked lips, managed a half smile. "Not before we get that boy home." By dusk on the 5th day, they saw the ridge. Mary straightened in the saddle, her eyes locked on the horizon. She hadn't said much that day, just kept Elijah close and her shoulders tight. But now she whispered, "That's it. That's our land." Jesse followed her gaze. A lone cottonwood stood near a crumbling fence. Beyond it, a small house, weather-beaten, half covered in dust, but still standing. The barn roof was caved in. The corral was wrecked. It wasn't the dream she'd been chasing, but it was real. It was home. Or it had been. As they got closer, Jesse slowed his mule. Boot prints. Wagon ruts. Fresh. He dismounted and crouched near the tracks. "These weren't yours," he said. Mary frowned. "What do you mean?" "Someone's been here. Recently." Then he saw the smoke, a thin line rising behind the barn. He raised his rifle. "You wait here," he said. "Stay low." Mary didn't argue. She slid off the saddle and crouched beside a large rock, shielding Elijah with her shawl. Jesse moved forward, slow, silent. At the far side of the barn, he saw them. 3 men, sitting around a cook fire, eating from tins. One was oiling a shotgun. Another laughed as he spit tobacco toward the dying embers. Squatters. Bandits by the look of them. Jesse stepped into view, rifle steady. "This ain't your land," he said. The men looked up, startled, but not scared. The one with the shotgun stood. "Didn't see your name on it." "She's got the deed," Jesse said. "Widow, son. This land belongs to them." The man grinned. "Then she can come tell us herself." Jesse didn't blink. "She won't need to. I'm all the telling you'll get." For a moment no one moved. Then the man with the shotgun raised it. Jesse fired first. The round hit the ground inches from the man's boots. Dust flew. The squatters scrambled, reaching for their weapons. But Jesse had already stepped forward, rifle still raised, eyes locked and voice like stone. "Next one goes through a kneecap, or a neck, you choose." The man hesitated, then spat in the dirt and backed off. "Fine," he muttered. "Ain't worth dying for some busted-up house." They grabbed what little gear they had and rode off. Jesse watched them until the dust disappeared. Only then did he lower his gun. Mary came up behind him, Elijah bundled against her shoulder. "You didn't kill them," she said quietly. "They didn't make me," Jesse replied. They stood there for a long minute, staring at the place she was meant to build a life. It was broken, burned, faded. But it was hers. Mary's voice trembled. "I thought it would be different." Jesse turned to her. "It can be." That night they unpacked what little they had. Jesse hammered the fence back into place with a rusted board and a stone. Mary cleaned the inside of the house, sweeping away dust, laying Elijah in a cradle that still smelled faintly of cedar. When the moon rose, Jesse stood on the porch, looking out across the land. Mary joined him. "Still planning on leaving?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, "No." She looked at him. "I came here to guide you through the desert," he said, "but I think I'm supposed to stay for what comes after it." Mary smiled. Not because it was safe now, not because the future was certain, but because he meant it. Morning came slow and golden, pouring through the warped window panes of the old house. Jesse stood barefoot on the porch, shirt sleeves rolled, sipping coffee from a chipped enamel mug. The air still carried the smell of smoke from last night's fire, But there was something else, too. Bread, maybe. Or warmth. Mary was inside, laughing softly at something Elijah had babbled. The sound rolled through the house like it belonged there. Jesse didn't move, not because he was stiff, but because he didn't want to. This porch, this broken railing, the dry hills beyond the fence, they weren't much. But they were his now, and he hadn't claimed them with gold or a badge or a rifle. He'd claimed them by staying. A week had passed since they'd driven the squatters off. In that time, Jesse had repaired the corral, patched the roof with salvaged wood, and taught Mary how to fire a Winchester straight, not out of fear, but so she'd never be helpless again. He'd also started sleeping through the night. No ghosts, no battlefield echoes, just the steady breath of a baby in the next room and the low rustle of a woman unpacking roots, one box at a time. At first, Jesse told himself he was just resting, helping her settle in. But by the third morning, he found himself trimming fence posts like he was prepping for a life, not a goodbye. And now, today, he was standing on the porch, watching Elijah take his first unsteady steps in the dirt, hands raised, eyes wide, stumbling toward nothing and everything. Mary walked out beside him, sleeves rolled, apron dusted with flour. She looked at Jesse. "You're still here." He glanced sideways. "Seems that way." "You were free to go." "I know. And yet—" Jesse took a long sip, then set the mug down on the railing. The sun hit the side of his face, revealing old scars, faded now, like stories he no longer needed to tell. "I've been running a long time," he said. "From the war, from what I lost, from what I could have been." He nodded toward Elijah. "But he doesn't care who I was. He only knows who I am when I hold him." Mary stepped closer. "And who is that?" Jesse looked at her, full and clear. "A man who doesn't want to ride away anymore." Silence settled between them, but it was the good kind, the kind that means something's taken root. She smiled. "We were never looking for a hero, Jesse, just someone who wouldn't leave." He reached out, gently brushed dust from her cheek. "I'm done leaving." She nodded. Not a dramatic embrace, not a kiss. Just two people who'd seen the worst the world could throw and chose, finally, to build something better. Together. Elijah fell in the dirt, rolled over, and laughed. Jesse walked down the steps, scooped him up, and tossed him gently in the air. The boy squealed, delighted. Behind him, Mary watched. And for the first time in years, Jesse Calhoun didn't feel like a man with a past. He felt like a man with a future. A man who'd come to guide a widow through the desert. And stayed to build a home.